Hey, I'm Daniel Berger, and this is Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Welcome to the podcast where Metro New York real estate meets great stories and a douse of humor. Forget the dry sales talk. Here we dive into the fun and unexpected moments of real estate. Join me each week as we explore Westchester, Long Island, the Bronx, and more. You'll hear about the people, the places, and the crazy situations that make this industry so interesting. Thanks to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, we're ready to share the lighter side of real estate. Whether you're a pro, a buyer, or just curious, we've got something for everyone. Ready for today's adventure? Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker with Daniel Berger. Today, I'm excited to have Jacob Kupin of the Kupin Group. He's been in real estate for 8 years. He's actually he moved from New York to Nashville. Nashville is the land of country music and a lot of singing. And I think actually Jacob started in the singing business. So with that, welcome to the podcast, and we'd like to learn. I want to learn a little bit about what brought you from New York to Nashville, and a little bit about your music experience.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. So grew up in New York, went to school in Pennsylvania for about 2 years. I was neuroscience pre-med, actually. Got out of that, got into the music industry, both as a performer and in artist management, and came to Nashville for a visit in 2012. Loved the city, came back in 2013 for a summer internship, and decided to stay here. Had so many great opportunities and met so many great people down here. So I transferred to Belmont University. Got my degree in music business and entrepreneurship, and then I've been doing real estate since 2016.
Are you still doing any performing in the music world?
Not really performing. I still freelance in the live events and talent and audience escort space. So still have my toes in those waters.
Nashville's just a hopping place. I know that. It's probably almost like the capital of bachelorette parties and bachelor parties and things like that. It's a lot, a lot of people love going there and all that. So that probably helps you with some of your real estate as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're a quickly growing city, and I think we're about to reach another phase of that growth. We have Oracle announcing that it's going to move its headquarters here. We have a massive development going on our East Bank. There's a lot of development, a lot of growth in this city, and people are moving here in droves.
Are you seeing in the real estate world that it's more for people's niche first home, or are they now more like doing either investment properties or second homes as well?
It's a combination. We see some investment. We see a lot of people that have moved here now are moving their parents here, right? So they've moved, they've settled, they've been here 5-10 years. Now parents are coming in into town. So we see a lot of that. We see a lot of first-time buyers trying to get into this market. I know when I first started, folks could buy a home for $900 a month. Obviously, that number's gone way up, so that's becoming a little bit of a challenge. We're seeing a lot of California move here. We're seeing a lot of New York move here. I think what appeals to people is it's politically diverse in the sense that if you are a far left Democrat, there's a place in Nashville that you'll fit in. If you are the farthest right conservative, there's a place in the Middle Tennessee region you fit in, and then everything in between. So I think folks from different political leanings have found their haven here. And then we've got no state income tax. So from a tax basis, it's a little bit lower. And so I think we're seeing a lot of people move in for a variety of reasons.
That's good. So I like so I guess one thing is that you also are a member of it. I guess you're the team leader for your team. So when did you decide, like after how many years did you decide that you wanted to have a team, and what's your thought process around that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I was on a team for 2 years, and then I went a solo agent for 6 months, and didn't like it. I wanted the community, I wanted the collaboration. Joined another team for 2 years, and that second of 2 years, I sold 55 homes that I self-generated, and realized it was time for me to kind of go out on my own. But of course, especially with the pandemic market and things moving so quickly and needing to show houses, fairly fast, um, I wasn't able to give the client service that I wanted to give, right? When I was doing 20 or 30 homes a year, I was able to give that level of service. We reached a point where I just wasn't able to service that many clients. And I actually remember the day, interestingly enough, where I showed about 40 houses, drove 150 miles. I started at 7 in the morning. I finished at 8 o'clock that night, put 4 offers in. Thankfully, all 4 were accepted. Otherwise, that would have been a really tough weekend. So it was,
Right.
but I just thought to myself, wow, I'm like showing houses to one person on the phone with another person. This is not the business I want to run. And so brought on my first agent, ended up at the peak of the team growing to 10 agents, which was great and a really great experience. We're now kind of in a rebirth and regrowth period. My wife actually left the nonprofit world, got her real estate license, and so she and I are teamed up together, working together, and then we're kind of regrowing the team. As you know, the real estate market has shifted a lot since the pandemic market, and so we're kind of restructuring with that in mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's what you always need to do is really evolve, right? And see what's going on. Um, I think a lot of people feel that real estate is not that hard to do, or you could do it part-time, but you really can't do it part-time, right? Because I mean, if you're going to have friends that are going to have you list their house, well, that's the easiest to do if you're part-time because obviously it's less it's less of an effort and with taking buyers. But you kind of so you do need to be full time, and that is something that I think is the most important thing I think to be available. I like that your logo is you're the realtor who's got your back because that's what our buyers, right? That buyers and sellers need that they need you to be the professional to know what might happen. And then when it does, and either to let them know that or be prepared for when something does happen that and you also have a guy for that. So that's very similar, right? Where we need to be the connectors, right? So successful real estate people are really people that um, people have questions and sometimes it's not even our realm of things, right? It's things like they're like, oh, I have a problem with the foundation of a house that I bought 3 years ago. And then you're like, oh, here's a contractor, here's an engineer, here's the different people that I've come in contact. So I'm assuming that's what you do as well with that.
Yeah, and we've got your back is something I came up with in a deep dive session with my real estate coach, and I think it really codifies how we feel about our clients. I tell people we treat you like family. We treat your purchase or sale as if it's our own, and we're going to advise you on that basis, right? I tell people I'm the first person to tell you don't lose this house. You've got to offer more. But I'm also the first person to say, hey, it's okay, right? We've had a couple recently where we've coached clients out of homes, right? That means we're not going to get paid on that transaction right now. But if I feel that a home is not the right fit, or I feel like they've learned something about themselves that will inform their long-term decision making, we're going to be the people that say, you know, this isn't the right fit. So, right, we're in the long-term relationship business and taking care of our clients, not just the quick sales. Um, and so, that's important. And then, like you said, with the vendors, we've got handymen we work with, we've got contractors we work with. I think it's important to be full service, not just after the not just or during the transaction, but even after it. And actually, interestingly, to that point, I actually just got my mortgage license as well, because especially with the recent real estate settlement things going on, I wanted to go deeper in our levels of service. So providing that kind of depth of coaching and guidance is really important to me. And I think, as we see this shift with commissions and things like that, I think we're going to see buyers and sellers look for higher levels of service. And we're hoping that we can deliver that.
Yeah, so I'm not really seeing yet a much of a change with you know the commission structure. I mean, my view is that the National Association of Realtors and the MLS is basically took the path of least resistance by coming up with a settlement that was better for them, where they would stop getting sued as opposed to something that really helps the buyers or the buyer agents or even listing agents. So I'm not really worried about that, and I think that you're obviously doing a great job, and it's probably better for the more professional real estate people because we're going to be able to explain to buyers how important it is to work with professional people. And when you look at what, you're doing I'm doing about 50 transactions myself a year. I'm the broker, but I'm kind of like the same. I own my brokerage, so I have a team. Everyone's on the team, right? So it's not the Danny Berger team, it's Remax Prestige Properties because since I'm the team lead and I'm the broker, it's really the same thing. So um, you know, so but ultimately I think that the professional, full-time, talented people are going to be able to explain it because our buyers and sellers need someone to have their back. And it's not free. There is a cost, like in any transaction, right? Where you know everything, anytime you hire a professional, there's a fee, and so we have to earn our fee. And so I think you said it really well, where you're selling to certain people and then their parents or their relatives are moving in. Well, they felt that you've satisfied them properly in the transaction, and you're going to get repeat business.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Part of me building a team, one of the challenges is that peers that ran teams oftentimes had online leads or Zillow or things that they were doing to generate business externally. And one of the things that I realized through that process is that most of our business, if not all of it, was referral and relationship based business. And that's kind of the shift we're making. Is for a couple of years I was trying to chase that kind of lead based cultivation business and realized that wasn't my zone of genius. That wasn't the place that I enjoyed spending my time. So we're kind of shifting back to either people we know or people that are referred to us, and it's been really a good shift for us, I think, to head in that direction. As we grow the business.
And so for me, I'm a big fan of Zillow. Actually, for the 8 or plus years that I've been doing it, I've always had Zillow. We're probably, for a team, spending about $12,000 a month on Zillow leads right now. But it makes sense because we're getting people that are interested in buying, and buyers become sellers. So as a new agent, I was much more on the buy side. Couple of years ago, I actually had even split. I was 26 and 26. Um, and so, I find, whether it's Zillow or Realtor.com or OpCity or whatever, you know, um, they're bringing people to us, and whether, they deserve to get a referral fee for that, because those people are not just doing one transaction, they're doing multiple, and they have, multiple people. But I agree with not pushing people. And so I have a client right now. I'm probably working with them for over 2 years now. Probably show them 60 houses. We've been bidding, but you know what? They're astute, and they're savvy, and they're not going to overspend for them, right? So everyone has a different budget, so that's not wrong. That is right for them. But I've done about 7 deals with their family. So these people are taking time. I'm like, I show houses every day. It's no big deal. So they like that I'm not pushing them. And the funny thing is, or it's ironic, is that the people that I'm working with, she's referred 2 people in the last like 6 weeks to me. Both people, the first house they've seen, they put an offer in, accepted offer, and we're in contract. So I was like, I'm going to show you houses for as long as you want. I mean, obviously, we're trying to help them, and we are putting in offers. But the 2 people that they referred to, one house, one offer, one contract, which is unusual. So you never know, and that's why you don't. My record for showing houses is 205 houses over 13 months. But then they bought a house for all cash. And then I've sold another house for them. They referred people. People were like, why aren't you firing them? I'm like, firing them? Why would I fire anybody? Right? Like, you can't push people into something. And so I think, Jacob, you said it the best way. If it's the right house based on the parameters that your client told you, then you're going to push them. Right. And if it's not, then you're going to push them too. You're going to push them away from the house.
Right. And I think to that point, helping them frame out their decision making, right? That's part of what I try to do, and what I coach my agents on is we're helping them see the big picture, which not that they're not savvy, they are savvy, but we've got years and years of experience, so I can help them see what 6 months or 12 months down the line looks like. And if they love a house at 570 and it's going to take 600 to get it, I'll help them break down what's that difference and what's that difference per month, and is that difference per month worth it? Or as we did recently, hey, if I had a client under contract on a house that was a larger home with a lot of deferred maintenance. And as they went through that process, I think they started to realize, wow, we don't want to deal with that from a money perspective, from a stress perspective. We're not what we're looking for. And so I kind of framed out for them, you can walk away from this, but make sure when you walk away, you're ready to walk a different direction, right? Don't walk away from this and end up again under contract on
Same thing, right?
1,000 square feet built in the 80s that needs work, right? Pivot to new construction, pivot to a renovation, right? So helping them kind of frame out what are your choices, and but also like we were saying, not letting someone walk away from a misinformation perspective or miscalculation perspective when it comes to, again, monthly payment or down payment, or oftentimes I see, I'm sure you see with clients that are, this is my bottom line. I help them understand, well, why is that your bottom line? Why is that your last number you're going to pay? And if it takes a short delta to get you into a home, is that worth it, right? I tell clients, you don't want to walk away from a home for less than $1,000 usually, because you're going to pay $1,000 in inspections on the next house, right? So if you're off by $500, maybe we should move forward with it. So and we talk a lot about too, what a seller should do versus what a seller has to do. And what I mean by that is talking about, in my opinion, the seller has to do things that are major challenges with the home that anybody's going to ask for, right? Structural issues, roof that's failing, things like that. A seller really has to do those things, right? Versus, and obviously it's a little bit subjective there, but versus, this one that we were recently in where the HVAC was old. It was working, but it was old. Should a seller pay for that? Probably they should pay for a portion of it. But if they are dug in and they won't, maybe that's a should but not have to, right? Is it a fixable problem or not a fixable problem? So again, helping clients kind of process all that information and digest it. And I love to do that. I really, really enjoy it.
I mean, it's really all about supply and demand, right? So if you have multiple buyers wanting a house, then they don't have to fix it. And if there's only one, then the buyer has more flexibility. But you could also argue that the price that you're willing to pay should be based off of that. And clearly, until you do the inspection, you don't know what's wrong with the house. So, right, you can make me put in an offer at whatever price, but until I learn more about the house, is it on septic? Is it the well water? Whatever, all those things, you're going to adjust your price based off of that. So I think obviously you need more information to make that happen. But so we do that a lot too, where buying the house is not just what the list price is. It's what maintenance needs to be to get to the house to a certain level. And then also, New York, we have a ton of taxes, right? So taxes could be, I mean, it depends on how big the house, but like on $1 million house, $27,000 of tax, right? So sometimes houses though might only have $16,000 of tax because the taxes change to the purchase price when you buy the house. So that factor has to be factored in, as well as what is going to be, maybe not in the year one, but in year two, what are your costs going to be? And all those things need to be put into the mix when you're analyzing how high should it go. And so I generally try to talk to my clients about their offer should be to their pain point. So their pain point being, what's the maximum amount of money that they're willing to spend, knowing all of these factors, that if somebody bids $1 more than that, they're not going to be upset or feel like they would have done that, right? Because that's the worst, when your client only bids to a certain number and then they lose the house and they find out and they were like, we would have gone to that number. So I try to do away with that frustration. I rather have people being like, you know what? somebody valued the house more than me because maybe money's less important to them or whatever, maybe there's a lot of factors, right? People are pregnant, they have to move, or their rent's going to increase. So different people have different factors, but you know, our buyers have to do what's best for them.
No, absolutely, and I think having that knowledge of where the line is super important. And I tell clients, when you make a decision, think about what the alternative decision is, right? So if you're capped at a certain price, if you're not getting the houses you want, are you willing to make a concession on something else, the location, the type of house, the size of house? And if you're not, then you might need to push the price up and be a little uncomfortable in the price, and kind of what levers do you pull in those situations? I also think that I don't know how it is in New York, but at least in Nashville, we're seeing some kind of residual pandemic market challenges. We're seeing a lot of sellers that I think are jumping off the ship sooner than they maybe should. And what I mean by that is they're not giving the concessions commensurate with what they should do, given where the market is, where supply and demand is, where the house is. And I think that's kind of a residual of the COVID market, where sellers could, as you know, put a home on the market and it sells in 5 minutes. So I've watched a number of deals where my buyers have understandably walked away, and we'll track that home and we'll see that they ended up doing what we wanted them to do the second go around, right?
Right.
And this house that we just had this weekend, we were asking for money for the HVAC that was almost 20 years old. There were two HVACs that were 20 years old, and the seller kind of dug in. They were willing to pay for part of it, but not as much as we would want. We're the second contract. So now that home is going back on the market, falling out of contract twice. And, again, that seller, I think, jumped off sooner than they could have or might have to do in the coming months.
Well, some of that also is because, listen, sometimes we have sellers and they're stuck in their ways, and maybe there is a talented listing agent working with them, and they just, and that's just the way it is. Or it's a listing agent that doesn't understand the situation, is not communicating properly. So that's in our business. You never know, right? Like we have to deal with a lot of different things. I mean, we're only responsible for ourselves, but I think that's, you know what, in the end of the day, it's better to have, you're not pushing people, you're managing the situation. You're not managing for this one sale, you're managing for their life, right? And your life. And so um, your clients will see that you're fighting for them, and that will be, that those referrals are going to be like, that Jacob won't push you into the house and he's going to fight for you, and that means sometimes you have to lose things. And so um, that's probably the way we want to go about doing the business. I feel like I'm very similar to you in how we do that. It's never about this check. It's always about, oh, it's really about getting people to the closing table, and really about it. I do it for the review. So I feel that when the transaction's over, if they can give me a 5-star review, then the rest of it will fall into place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the way to look at it is what's the end result? The client's walking away at the end of this happy, or and again, what's it going to look like in 6 months, right? We had a client under contract for a pretty high number, and it was very exciting at the beginning. They wanted a house with a lot of land, and this had the land. But as we dug into it, as we learned more, yes, the land was good, but we kind of realized that the house was not much bigger than the house they live in now, and they have two kids, and part of the move was really for more space. And I think they realized that, land is great, but we'd rather have less land and have the house that we can move our family into. So again, as you know, sometimes clients will learn through that process, and sometimes you've got to go under contract to understand that, right? You've got to go under contract and really granularly think through it to realize, hey, you know what? This thing that I thought was really important to me when push came to shove was less important because this other thing was more important. So
So
I think
we're
that, yeah.
No, we're a little different in New York. So in New York, we don't go into, when we're in contract, we're done. So we go from accepted offer, and then we have to do our due diligence before we get into contract. So some of our due diligence has to be before that, and then it's during the process. But it's kind of it's it's good and it's bad because while you're doing your due diligence, you can lose a house, right? We did due diligence. I had a due diligence on a house that was like $1.9 million. My clients were actually from Nashville. They flew in. They did an $1,500 of inspections. Um, we signed the contract. We were about ready to wire the money, and someone knocked on the door and offered $200,000 more.
Wow.
And so, and it was just like that was it. I mean, how do you $200,000 on $1.8 million is a lot, and we lost it. So I was able to get my clients' money back for their inspections. Um, and then we're now in contract on another house. So it was kind of like, the buyers are pretty cool, and we're all like, maybe it was just meant to be type of stuff, because what are you going to do about that, right? We're not chasing, I think they're much happier in the second one. So sometimes, you just have to let it play out, and you can't be so focused and fighting for them to get that house. You know what? That's a ridiculous amount of money over. They wanted it more. We didn't get it in time. Move on. So
You bring that up. My parents just sold a house in New York, and I got to see the differences in process. And we talked about New York and California moving here. That's one of the things that we've found ourselves doing is kind of explaining the difference in the flow of the process. Because as you were saying, it's different, right? Here, you make the offer kind of blind a little bit.
right,
You're locked in, and then nobody can come take it. Then you've got this quiet period of diligence versus, like you were saying, in New York, you're kind of doing the diligence as the deal's coming together. So we do tend to explain to folks that, like, sorry, the difference in what that looks like. The other thing we talk to folks a lot about is code, right? Like in California, from my understanding, I think New York might be similar. There's kind of a code, bring it up to code obligation. I don't know if that's how it is in New York, but in Nashville, the contract actually specifies the opposite. There is no obligation for a seller to bring the home to code. So that's another conversation we have a lot. We get California buyers come in and they say, here's all the things not to code. The seller has to fix it. And I get to say,
no, you don't, right?
not only do
Um,
you not, it's actually not. I mean, you can ask for whatever you want, but the contract specifically says the seller does not have to bring things to code.
right. No, in New York, some things are to code, some things aren't. It really depends. I mean, nothing has to be brought to code. The biggest thing would be is if someone did work to a house and they didn't pull permits. But I have a client right now buying a house where things were done in the basement, but they disclosed it. And that's the proper way to do it. You say, listen, there's a gym and a bedroom in the basement. We did not pull permits for it. So they told us that, right? So they're buying a house with an unfinished basement that actually has bonus space. So that's okay because that's what they're disclosing. So as long as you know about it going into it, I think that's okay. And some people don't want that, and other people are like, okay, right? So as long as you know it going into it, then we can have the proper conversation. The worst would be you think it's a bedroom, and then you start pulling all your paperwork, and then you're like, no, that's not a bedroom, and that's not legal space, right? And the square footage is not. So that's when it's more of a problem, not necessarily a problem when it's disclosed. So it goes back and forth. So it doesn't say either in the contract. It's a lot of times we do it as is, right? So it's as the house is as of inspection day. So um as is isn't that anything can happen. It needs to stay in the same shape, without roof leaking or things like that. So that it is a little different. Connecticut's more like what you're doing. So I do operate in both states. More of my business in New York. So New York, it's probably better for the seller in essence, and in Connecticut, it's better for the buyer. In your case, it's better for the buyer because you get a little bit of a 1 to 2 week lockup period where they get to do their due diligence and they don't have to worry about somebody coming and stealing the house from them.
Right. And I tell my client with that framework, I tell my clients, we've got leverage in the inspection period that we might not have in the original negotiation period because of that reason. Right. Once we're
Right.
locked in, they're not talking to anybody else most likely. And so we've got the room to, really dive deep. Whereas in the diligence period before the negotiation, anybody can swoop in.
Right. So that's why from buyer's standpoint, I like it. I don't like it from the sellers, which is why that the seller probably wants higher pricing, knowing that there's going to be some give back. But sometimes people can say, listen, this is not, this price is the price. But again, that's the negotiation back and forth. And that is why, if anything, it makes it more important for you to be a diligent and professional buyer's agent, so that you can, negotiate where appropriate. That's very important.
I see that with escrows too. I know when my parents did their house, the escrow was a substantial number where if they lost that number, that would be a meaningful change for them. And so, which is, it's interesting to me in Nashville, we don't really have escrows that, in my opinion, are meaningful enough to do their job effectively. So you'll see maybe 1% of the purchase price. So you'll see a couple $1,000s often as the escrow money. And the handful of times that I've watched people want to walk away outside of the parameters of the contract, they usually can, because I had one, we represented the seller. The buyer was buying it for his two daughters. His two daughters informed him they signed leases elsewhere. And the day of closing, he said, keep my $4,000, I'm out of here. And obviously we could sue, but you have to, as you know, have damages, and it's a very long and expensive process. And so it's interesting to me that we still do this earnest money exercise, but it doesn't seem to me that it is a substantial enough sum that makes buyers go, ooh, I don't want to lose that, right? I had a buyer that did the same thing, obviously very infrequent, but a buyer did the same thing where closing week, he learned some stuff that he didn't like about the property, and he just said, I'm not closing, gave up his earnest money, and that was it. And so there's some interesting comparisons to that I think,
Yeah, we don't really are in both New York and Connecticut. Connecticut, there is earnest money, not in New York. Then eventually the earnest money becomes an actual deposit of about, usually it's 10%, except if it's going to be like an FHA or a VA, then it might be more 3.5 to 5%. But generally it's 10% would be about what it is. But once you're in contract, really, unless they can't deliver free and clear title, you really do have to go through it. I only have really one time when a buyer in New York actually forfeited his deposit of $50,000, but that's because after he had a mortgage commitment, he basically decided that he didn't like work and went into work and basically told his boss to go below or something, and he got fired. So he no longer could get the loan, right? Because he basically and he proactively did something to prevent that. So there was, if he would have been fired, that would have been different. Actually, after your mortgage commitment, you're kind of screwed. There's a little bit of a period, but it would have been a little bit more debatable. But because he proactively caused his termination, they were like, we're not giving you the money back. And then what's crazy is, he should have just bought the house, because we could have bought the house, sold the house. He would have lost less than the 50,000. But not everyone's always rational, and they don't always ask you before they do it. And it's more like you're trying to pick up the sticks after they've already fallen. So that's very, 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 very rare. So generally, you do have to buy the house once you're in contract, as long as the seller can satisfy a clear title.
It's
So
interesting that you kind of just to share that. I think that's one of the challenges from a seller perspective in Nashville is that we have a similar contract language that says, like, if you intentionally change your situation, but I think that for the most part lenders are comfortable giving a denial letter, and so we do see folks days before, days of closing, just getting that denial, and maybe they shouldn't have, right? Maybe, to your point, maybe they didn't know.
so when I represent sellers, I want to see what the denial letter is, because I once had someone deny a letter for failing to appraise, except they waived their appraisal. So the lender should have never given the denial letter, and we had a couple of conversations about, they knew what it was because it was in the contract. So I asked another lender, what does this denial mean? They're like, oh, it didn't appraise. I'm like, yeah. So I represented the seller. We made the sale go through. So it was funny, because in that case, it was a junior agent was just being manhandled, or it was a man, but a manhandled, and the broker ended up stepping in and basically was told the buyer, you have to buy this house or you will lose your deposit because you waived it. So it was kind of like we ended up getting it done, and I think we ended up having conversations with the lender, but the lender shouldn't have done that. But you're right. So sometimes you do need to double check on stuff and ask different questions. Uh, about that. So yeah, it's always right. Every time we pick up our phone, something different happens, and it's always, problem solving, and you either have to find a guy, you have to get their back. I mean, those are you're doing that every single day, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and like you said, every day is different, right? I love that every day is a new challenge, a new experience, new questions. And so that's really keeps it interesting to me, and some of it's familiar, right? The inspection period. I've done the inspection period enough times that I kind of know the process, and it's been fun to have my wife on board because I get to share with her now some of the things I've learned, right? So she'll run into something and I'll say, "Oh, we're gonna do this, 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 and this," because we've just done it so many times, and I can kind of tell what's going on. I tell her we want to, and you probably know this, we want to listen to what they're really saying, not the words they're saying, but what the intention is, right? So, like using this house as an example, the words they were saying was, "We're worried about the HVAC going out, and we want the money for the HVAC." Well, the seller was really starting to play ball with money towards the HVAC, and they still were not excited to move forward. And I've just done this enough times now to kind of see underneath the surface that what they were really saying is, this house is overwhelming to us. It
Right.
wasn't, give me the HVAC money and we're good to go. It's everything in this house is just starting to feel like too much. We're quantifying it in this HVAC moment because that's what's kind of right in front of us. But really, it's that sense. And what I tell my clients is, if the magic is gone, the magic is gone, and it's really hard to get that back. And if your gut is just being like, this is not right, let's not push forward, because oftentimes, if you even if you convince yourself to push over this hump, that feeling just grows, and then you're days before the contract, and then you're really freaking out because you don't have an out and you're kind of stuck. So I think it's been helpful to have done this as long as I have, because I've picked up on some of those things over the years.
Well, I think those cues you really have to, right. They it was basically a false flag about the HVAC. That was just, they just never thought that they would get the money for the HVAC. So it was a lot easier to blame the HVAC than making it be like they just changed their view of the house. But ultimately, you know, you don't want your clients to buyer's remorse is real. Um, and the stress of buying a house, even if the house that you absolutely love, it's still real. Things break all the time. As a homeowner, that, and that's why people shouldn't be buying at the tops of their budget, because things happen and you have to kind of have like a rainy day fund, and, grow into your house and things like that. So it is important. I do feel that um, our clients sense, if we're desperate, if we're long-term players. I basically tell people it's hurry up and wait, and we can wait as long as you want. But when you find the house and it's the right house, then we're gonna, both of us, use the same thing. We're gonna give you the strategies that help you take down that house, because coming in second in real estate, you don't get a silver medal, you don't get keys to the house, you keep looking. So you have to win, but you have to win with appropriate bids that make sense on appropriate properties. And so, that's our job. Um, so it's a hard job. So how do you deal with like your work life balance? Because it always seems that, like, as a realtor and we're independent contractors, it just seems like we're always working. I tell people they can text me 24/7. I'm probably going to answer 18/7. But, like, how do you and your wife handle, the work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, not gonna lie, making sure that we're carving that time for ourselves and for our relationship and for friends and family. But I think that just the way I'm wired, the way I've always been, I couldn't do it any other way. I just don't know how to, or don't, I enjoy it. I enjoy the work that I'm doing. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy talking to clients. So to me, it's fun, right? Which is great to say, right? My job is fun. I enjoy it. Of course, there are tough moments and tough clients and things like that, but for me, it's fun. It's like, so I think that helps do it. Like you said, 24/7. I don't mind talking to a client at 10 o'clock at night, coaching them through something. I enjoy that. Um, I think having my wife come into the business has been a game changer for the work-life balance piece because, an example comes to mind. We had a listing appointment where they wanted to meet Friday at 6 p.m. And we had people coming over for dinner at the house at like 7:30 or something. And previously, my wife would have been home prepping for people to come over, and I would be at this appointment, and she'd probably be getting a little frustrated that I was running late, and we wouldn't have gotten to spend that time together. Whereas now we both went together to the listing appointment, and got to spend that time together. We're still working, but we were around each other. We got to enjoy each other, and then we both came home around the same time. And so having that's been really helpful. I think it helps her to understand what my life is like. I think, now she's seeing that, hey, those times that
Right.
I had to answer the phone on vacation, that's
Right.
what we're doing. And so,
Well, what you should have just done is left your front door open, throw some chips and guac
I'm not getting away.
and tell your guests, listen, we're doing work. Take, the beer's in the fridge. Start without us, and when we get there, we'll figure out what we're having for dinner.
Yeah, make yourself
So,
no, but it's really it's nice, and same thing. Like if we're on a vacation, and we have to take a call. Previously, it would have been I'm taking the call, my wife's going off to do something else. Well, now we're sitting together around
right.
the hotel room desk, both talking to this client. So I think that's been a huge help in it. But it's tough, as you know. It is tough. The work life balance is tough. I also think that um, as you know, it we don't get paid hourly. We don't get paid up front. We get paid on our sales, which is fine, right? I'm still going to shoot people straight and be honest and upfront with them. But I think that there is a challenge to that when a client walks away from a home and now we're back to zero again. And I think that when the market was moving quick, it was okay, right? We were keeping pace, but as the market is slowing down a little bit, from what we're seeing, it makes that a little bit tougher. Doesn't change how we're going to serve clients or work with clients, but it still makes those moments. I tell people we've got such a delta, right? You can make a really nice sum of money in a month, or you could make $0, and it hinges on like this little kind of fulcrum of finding the right home, negotiating the right home. So just that piece is interesting to me. It's one of the few industries, as you know, that works like that, right? Attorneys don't work like that. Attorneys, you're paying them hourly, and if you decide to not move forward with the case, you're paying them. Now some do, but
Right.
this is an interesting part of the business and part of the work effort.
I mean, I always think that you can't look at the money per month. You have to like smooth it out over the year. Um, and then see, if you're doing the right things, so you talk about a slowdown, but I think it's a slowdown from like going at warp speed. So we still haven't gone back to what normal markets would be. There's an ebb and flow in everything. And now that even interest rates are starting to come back down again, if there's enough of a supply, at some point it's still gonna be there. But again, with the changes in the real estate world, I think people like yourself are still going to be busy because people are going to see that you add value. Whether you're a buyer or a seller, you know what you're doing. Put people in your hands, and you're going to help them. So, people. Um, I think the part-time people, right? I think if you look at the number of realtors that are out there in the country, I think the average sales are like two or one. It's so low. So there's so many part-time people. Let them leave because they're not really professionals. I don't even know if you can call them semi-professional. They're more like hobbyists. Um, and I'm thinking that people that are really looking to sell their house, buy houses, are going to want to have professionals. And certainly, Jacob, it was great talking to you today. It's always good to get people from around the country um, telling us about their business, telling us about how who they are. Uh, Jacob, you definitely got your clients back, and it's good that you know a guy, you know a girl, and that's what our clients need. So Thank you very much for coming on. And obviously, if anyone is interested in moving to Nashville, Jacob's your guy. He and his wife can help you with any buying, selling, or renting. And so, with that, it's Daniel Berger with another edition of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Thank you very much, Jacob.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me on the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. If you laughed, learned something, or just had a good time, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the podcast. A big shout out to our sponsor, RE/MAX Prestige Properties, for making this all possible. Remember to leave a review if you enjoyed the show. It helps more people find us. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep exploring the adventures in your neighborhood. I'm Daniel Berger, your New York Realtor, and I'll see you in the next episode.